So before we get into today's talk, I've got to show something to you. This is a copy of my favorite book growing up. It's called Mad Game by Roland Lazenby. And this is the earliest biography of Kobe Bryant that I remember being published. It was published back in 2000, I think, right around the time that they won their first title together, Kobe and Shaq. And as you can see, if you're listening to this on podcast, I'm holding up the book with a completely broken spine. I read this so much as a kid that I completely broke the spine. There's pages falling out of it. There are probably 100 dog-eared pages in here. They're all marked up and highlighted. And I share this with you to make clear right up front, I am an absolutely fanatical Kobe Bryant fan. If you watched the Deep Game of Kobe Bryant movie that we put together, I put like 100+ hours into that thing. So you can tell, like, Kobe was a huge influence on me. And so I tell you this and show this to you up front because the question of today is, should you train like Kobe Bryant? And should you copy Kobe's approach to training for yourself? This is a question that comes up all the time, okay? All the time. Every talk that I give, it seems, there's somebody responding with, but Kobe did it this way. He trained 8 hours a day. Should I do it that way? He trained 6 hours a day. Should I do that? And it's a question that we really need to talk about because there's an overarching theme here and something that you need to know, okay? You need to know this as an up-and-coming player. It's very important. It's critical. And so I just want to preface this by saying, like, I love me some Kobe Bryant, but if you try to copy his training program, you will destroy your game and your basketball career. You'll destroy it, all right? And I speak from experience because I actually did. Back when I was in, I think it was 7th or 8th grade, a friend of mine found this very obscure article online that said Kobe followed the 666 program, whatever that means. Well, essentially, it was meant to mean that he trained 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, 6 months out of the year. Whether he did this or not, I have no idea. Kobe was very secretive about his training, and his approach to training, as I understand it, was changing all the time depending on what he needed, as it should, right? But all I knew was 666. That we had no YouTube back then. Like it was, there was. That's why I marked this book up so much, because I was hunting for like any hint of what he actually did in his training. And so as soon as I heard that, I was like, I'm going to do that. So I started training 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, 6 months out of the year. Not necessarily 6 months, but during my entire off season. And I didn't do this for a day or for a week. I didn't give this a try. I actually did it for years. I did this for multiple years. And by the end of that time, the analogy that I'll give to you is the way that I felt was sort of like when you're walking down the sidewalk and you see a soda can that somebody stepped on that's all crumpled up and like, compressed. That's how my body felt all the time. I was a mess. And despite all that work, I was putting up like 9 or 10 points per game most of the time. I had not broken through to nearly the level of performance that I was hoping for. And it wasn't until I dramatically scaled back my training. And I believe there's a talk. I think the title, don't quote me on this, but I think the title is Stop Working So Hard. There's several talks on hard work, but I have shared the approach that I shifted to and the exact schedule that I use. So look that up if you can. But my schedule was pared back dramatically to only maybe 2 or 3 hours per day and not 6 days a week. As soon as I did that, my game exploded. Okay, I went from 9 or 10 points per game to 24 points per game. I stopped copying Kobe's approach and I did what was right for me. My game exploded, okay? So we're going to go a little bit deeper into this concept of like, should you train like Kobe Bryant? And more specifically, or more broadly rather, should you train like anybody else or any other NBA player? And there's a few things I want to point out right up front, okay, that should be very obvious, but they need to be said here. Number one, Kobe Bryant had a team of therapists and trainers at his beck and call all the time. He had a world-class facility, the Lakers facility, that he could get physical therapy at. He could have massages every day, ice baths, acupuncture, people stretching him out, people doing soft tissue work. He had, nutritionists and people doing blood testing, and he had all types of therapists and people who are working on him all the time, okay? This was a full-time job for him. He didn't have to contend with schoolwork and things of that nature. His entire job was to be the best basketball player he could be. If you don't have those resources at your disposal, you cannot do what he did. You can't, okay? And Kobe couldn't have done what he did. He would be the first to tell you, I am sure, that without that team of trainers and therapists and people working on him, he would never have been able to train as much as he did. Second of all, I read a study a little while back that actually said that there's 1% of the population, give or take. I don't think it's exactly 1%. It's like maybe a fraction of a percentage, but there's let's say 1% of the population, very small percentage, that can actually operate on 2 or 3 hours of sleep per night, and their entire body regenerates after just 2 or 3 hours of sleep per night. The rest of the population, if you tried to do this, would be shattered. Like, your health would decline rapidly. You would be a zombie. I am one of those people. I need a good sleep per night each night. I'm sure you are as well. Kobe Bryant was like wildly documented to get almost no sleep. He would stay up very late watching game tape. He would be the last person on the team plane to fall asleep because he'd be watching game tape on his laptop or whatever. And he would sleep very, very little. I realized a little bit too late that Kobe Bryant is one of that fraction of a percentage that really doesn't need a whole lot of sleep. He has otherworldly genetics for recovery and for endurance and for resilience within his body that just, he doesn't need what we need, right? He can get away with so much more because of his natural genetics. And on top of that, he's got that team of people working on him. Okay, so if you don't have those two things going for you, you can't do what Kobe did. And this is the third point that I'm going to make. And this is going to sound a little bit blasphemous. Okay, so this is why I showed you that Kobe book that I read the heck out of growing up. And I'll share like a very brief story with you. So a really close friend of mine, the only person who is a bigger Kobe fan than me that I know of in the entire world, is a close friend of mine who I grew up playing with. He was just a fanatic of Kobe. Like, Kobe was the biggest role model of his life. And we've since grown much older. He's 32 now. And he came over to my house recently. He's got a really high-paying job, very successful, very intelligent person. I really admire this person a lot. And he came over to my house recently, and we were just chatting. I was rewatching like the tape of Game 7 when Kobe was playing the Boston Celtics in 2010, won his 5th title. And we start talking about Kobe in that series, how beat up his body was. He had like broken fingers in his shooting hand. He had no cartilage left in his knees. He was just absolutely run down, and his shooting percentage was just dropping like this, and his performance was dropping. He shot very poorly that game, and like the biggest game of his career actually was that game. And we start talking, and we both agreed, okay? And again, this is going to sound blasphemous, all right? I warn you. We both agreed that if Kobe Bryant had cut his training in half by 50%, he would have been a better player and he would have had a better career. Now, that's just my opinion and our opinion. And after a lot of study of what, pretty much every Kobe Bryant book that is out there, I've read. I've studied all of his interviews and watched a whole lot of Kobe Bryant, over a long period of time, several decades. And I can say very confidently, in my opinion, if he had cut his training in half, he would have been a better player and he would have had a better career. Not only because of the wear and tear on his body. Like, this guy, you got to understand, again, broken fingers in his shooting hand. At one point, he fractured his right wrist. And instead of getting surgery on all this stuff, like the most important part of his game, his shooting hand, aside from maybe his mind, instead of taking time off, getting surgery, resting, getting therapy, and healing up, he just kept playing, all right? From like 2007, I believe, until the Achilles injury, he just went balls to the wall all the time. He was playing for Team USA in the summer, and then he'd come back and he'd play a full season with the Lakers deep into the playoffs. And on top of that, he'd be doing his 6 hours per day of training 3 times per day, getting therapy all the time, and so on and so forth. And so Kobe, you could see the decline happen, and it was heartbreaking to watch. He was still so good late up in his career. My favorite Kobe season actually was 2013, the season that he blew out his Achilles, because the mastery that he showed of the game and the way that he was able to will the Lakers into the playoffs that season, it was just incredible. As like a really he was an old man at that point, right? And he was just, I think he was third in the league in scoring. He was playing full games. He was just incredible. Like, it was mastery. And yet his body was just so worn down. And even if you ask Tim Grover, who trained Kobe and MJ, he said the hardest thing to do was to get Kobe to do less. And he was always trying to get Kobe to do less. And Kobe just wasn't having it, right? So with all these things considered, these 3 points: number one, he's got a team of people helping him. Number two, he's got crazy genetics where he can sleep almost, not at all, like a couple hours a night, and then train 6 hours per day for decades. None of us have those genetics, all right? Or probably none of us have those genetics, unless you're really lucky. And number three, he still should have done less. Most likely, he still should have done less. So with all those things considered, it should be very clear that no, you shouldn't train like Kobe. You should not do the 6 hours per day or the 8 hours per day or the approach that he took for himself. It worked for him to a degree. I do believe he could have made some alterations to that approach, but long story short, do what is best for you, not what Kobe thought was best for him. All right. And that is the core point here that I really want to drive home, is that I'll use an analogy. Okay. Pre-COVID times, when you would go into the weight room locally, there's probably, in a lot of weight rooms, there's this big boys section over there where the heavy weights are lifted. If you go in as like a 15-year-old, let's say, who is just getting into weightlifting for the first time, and you go down to the big boys section, you find the strongest guy in the gym, that like juiced up bodybuilding, powerlifting, steroid guy who's been training for decades, and you try to do his training program. Like, nobody would do that because it just seems ridiculous. Like, why would you do that? You're not going to lift the weights that he's lifting and train as much as he's training. First of all, he's on steroids. Second of all, he's got, like, not that Kobe was on steroids, but you get the point. His genetics are just different. His length of time that he's been training for is different. His strength and his ability is different. So you're not going to do what he did. Otherwise, you'd end up like that crumpled pop can like I was, right? You just wouldn't do that. And yet that's what a lot of basketball players try to do. And the only correct approach, and the real approach that Kobe took, actually, the part that you do want to copy, is Kobe did what was best, or what he felt was best for Kobe. He wasn't copying other people. He was customizing his training for himself, for his genetics, for his resources, for his time that he could put into it, for his needs, right? And that's the only thing to copy. Do exactly what is right for you and hunt down the right approach for you. There are, give or take at any given time, 450 players in the NBA. There should be 450 different approaches to training for every player in the NBA. That's the approach to take. Find what works for you. And I can kind of point you in the right direction, but at the end of the day, it's only you who knows really what your game needs. You can get coaching, you can get help, you can get mentoring, you can get assistance in different ways, but your training program should be unique to you. If you're copying somebody else's, you're doing it wrong, because you're not that person. You're you, all right? And you are, we say in Deep Game, you are one of one. There was only one of you. You are completely and totally unique. Your genetic makeup is unique. Your strengths and weaknesses are unique. Your mental makeup is unique. Your psychology is unique. Every single part of you is completely unique. There has never been one of you before. There will never be one of you after. And your training should reflect that, okay? So should you train like Kobe Bryant? Absolutely not. Trust me, I tried it. It doesn't go well unless you are Kobe, right? Should you train like Michael Jordan? No. Only Michael Jordan should train like Michael Jordan. Should you train like LeBron James or Chris Paul or anybody else in the NBA that may come to mind? No. Train in the way that works for you. And that is when the real magic of your game will come through. And I saw this when I shifted from the crazy 6 hours per day schedule to something that really worked for me. And so I will refer you to that talk. Again, I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure going off memory, it is called Stop Working So Hard. There's a template and a schedule in that talk. Maybe somebody can correct me on this if I am wrong. I think there is another talk I did on hard work as well that you can, and there's hard work in the title. So it's one of those two. Look that one up. Go over that schedule. That is going to point you in the right direction for what you should do. But we really needed to get this out of the way because there's so many questions about, shouldn't I do it the way that Kobe did it? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do it the way that is right for you. And that is how you're going to get the best results and the most true, the approach is going to be truest to you. All right. So I hope that helps you out. I wish somebody had given me that talk when I was younger. Knowing me, I probably wouldn't have listened anyway, but I hope that you do. All right. So I hope that helped you out, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, it's Coach Taylor. I hope you enjoyed today's talk. And if you did, the best thing to do right now, while it's fresh in your mind, is go to deepgame.com or click the link in the description, and it'll take you to our free Deep Game Masterclass, where you'll actually learn the entire deep game of basketball with all 8 laws and all of the fundamentals that you need to know as a high-level basketball player. We've had players call this the best hour of basketball learning of their lives, and it's completely free. So go to deepgame.com right now, or just click the link in the description, and I can't wait to see you there.